Hi, good morning, everybody. Hope everybody had a good week. I got some things here I'd like to share with y'all on something to me is very important. Which I mean, most of it is obviously, but I struggle with a lot is God's timing, and I've heard people say God's timing's perfect. And matter of fact, I used that earlier this week, and I know it sounds easy to say, and it is easy to say, but it's a lot harder to accept. But I was reading in First Kings chapter 18, and I think it starts there towards the end of 18, and it goes all the way through on to chapter 19. And it's the story about Elijah. It's when we first really hear about Elijah the prophet, and Elijah was super prophet. He was one of he was taken away by God. He didn't experience death on earth. He was just a super awesome prophet, man. He was a great man of God. And in chapter 18, we read about him, and and he had at this beginning of towards the middle of 18, we read about him, and he takes 450 prophets, they're called, of Baal, and he's trying to call them out and tell them that their God is not really who he says he is, and that he's not worth worshiping, and he's trying to um, witness to them. Well, maybe not. He's just trying to prove that our God is who he says he is. And so, to sum it all up, he more or less calls these 450 dudes out. He calls them out, and they go out onto Mount Carmel, and they go up there, and he has them make an altar, and he makes an altar, and they are gonna sacrifice a burnt offering of a bull. And so these 450 jokers, they start praying, and he lets them go first, and he tells them, let your God light up your altar and burn your offering. Let him do it supernaturally. You do your thing, y'all pray, dance, whatever it is y'all got to do, and let's see this go down. And so these 450 dudes take off, and they're praying all day and all night, and it just doesn't happen. Well, so to cut forward a little bit, then Elijah steps up, and he just calls on God and prays, and asks them to prove that, ask God to prove that he is who he says he is. And not only did he make the sacrifice catch fire and burn the offering, but Elijah had already dumped water all over it, around it, in a ditch 3 times. And so, I mean, it was just supernatural. And these guys just, I mean, it blew them out of the water. It was a great witnessing tool. So I tell you the story so you know a little bit about what Elijah had experienced up to the next part I'm going to tell you. And so obviously he was confident in who God was and what God could do. And I think a lot of us are as well. Well, the very next story we read about Elijah is he's praying for rain for King Ahab, and there's lots of it's a dry spell, and he's praying for rain. And so he goes up. This is the very next story. He had just seen the hand of God work when immediately, as soon as he prayed, God did what he was praying for. And so he saw immediate results, and that's what we're looking for a lot of times. But then the very next story we read about him, he's praying, and he's praying, and he's praying, and he's praying for this rain, and he sends his servant out 7 times. That's how much questioning he had. After just witnessing God's immediate results, he expected that then. But the thing of it was he was expecting it on his time and not God's time. And so he sent his servant out 6 times, go check and see if there's rain coming. Go check and see if there's rain coming. And so on the 7th time, the servant comes back, and he says, I see a little cloud. It's the size of a man's fist sticking up over the sea. And so then Elijah knew that God's timing was now, and so I think a lot of times we see things happen in our life, and we know that that's from God. But sometimes when we pray and things aren't immediate, we have doubts, we have questions, and we wonder, what was this really God, and so we need to stay like Elijah, and we need to keep the faith and know that God's timing is the perfect timing. It's not always our timing, but it's God's. And so the verse I'd like to share with y'all is from Psalms chapter 27, verse 14, which is by David, which was another man who had to know what timing was. He was anointed king at 16 years old and was chased through the wilderness and all through things. And fast forward 14 years later, he was finally king. But he was anointed by God at 16 and didn't become king until 30-something. So you talk about needing to know God's timing. This guy who we get the verse from had some timing deals to mess with too. And so verse 14 in chapter 27 says, wait patiently for the Lord. Be brave and courageous. Yes, wait patiently for the Lord. And so I'd like to encourage everybody as you're going through this week and as you're going through hard times in life, decisions you have to make, struggles you're going through, just be brave and be courageous and wait for the Lord. The Lord is right there. He's never left, and His timing is way better than anything we could count for. It may not always be our timing, but it's there. And so just remain strong in faith and be brave, and God's going to pull us through, and God's timing to be better than anything we can imagine. So hope everybody has a good week. Keep praying for each other, and I'll talk to y'all next week.